Imagine finding a letter that goes against what people have been saying about Jesus Christ for hundreds of years. This is not just any document, but a detailed account written by Aurelius Lentulus, a Roman observer who knew Jesus well and often wrote to Caesar. This new information prompts us to reflect on long-held misconceptions about Jesus. In art, Jesus is often depicted with Caucasian features. Solmann's famous 1940 painting, which depicts Jesus with light eyes and blonde hair, is a case in point. As Solmann worked with leading Christian publishers, this painting, called Christ's Head, became an important element of religious art. This image became an important part of the religious and cultural life of people all over the world. It has been used on prints, stained glass windows, oil paintings, and bedside lamps. But Lentulus's account gives a different picture. He says that Jesus looked like a typical first-century Galilean Jew, with brown eyes and olive skin, which is very different from the way he's usually depicted in Western art. The biblical accounts don't say much about Jesus' appearance, and what they do say is often contradictory. In Isaiah, the coming Messiah is called without beauty or majesty, but in the Psalms, he is called more beautiful than the sons of men. This shows a great difference in the way the Bible is understood. This level of complexity also exists for other characters in the Bible. Unlike Jesus, Old Testament kings such as Saul and David are clearly described as tall and handsome. This shows that the Bible sometimes speaks of physical traits. The different ways in which the Bible talks about appearance in different texts are illustrated by these contrasts in the description of people. If you're interested in how historical and artistic viewpoints can change our perception of people like Jesus, please feel free to like and subscribe to receive more interesting content. With your help, we can continue to publish these interesting stories. This episode examines Lentulus photos, as well as biblical and artistic images, to see how these images have changed our perception of historical and religious figures. By peeling back these images, we want to make you think about what you think you know about one of history's most represented figures. The Lentulus letter stands out from other historical documents in that it gives a detailed description of Jesus Christ from the Roman point of view. Believed to have been written by Aurelius Lentulus, it gives a vivid picture of Jesus, reinforced by the times in which he lived. Let's look at the history of the letter and what it says. According to the story, Pontius Pilate, then governor of the Holy Land of Israel and Palestine, often watched Jesus from his portico as he ministered. Although Pilate was known for writing to Caesar, he was not the only person in power to take an interest in Jesus. In the days following Jesus' resurrection, the high priest Gamaliel, who later taught the Apostle Paul, also took an interest in Jesus. The Library of Congress has Gamaliel's own descriptions of Jesus, which shows how numerous and varied the accounts of those present are. But the letter from Lentulus is perhaps the most interesting. It's a copy of a letter found in a monastery along with other ancient books. Supposedly addressed by the Roman consul Lentulus to the Emperor Tiberius, it dates from the 12th year of Tiberius's reign. In Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, Lentulus is mentioned as a person who was in Judea at the time of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. This person adds historical context to the story. Although scholars disagree on the authenticity of the letter, its description is convincing. According to Lentulus, Jesus had a noble and lively face. According to him, Jesus had slightly wavy blonde hair, strongly curved black eyebrows, and intense, piercing blue eyes that exuded an air of wonderful grace. He is described with a dignified nose and an almost blonde beard that harmonized with his long, uncut hair. The description doesn't stop at physical features. Lentulus also talks about the way Jesus stood. He says that Jesus' slightly sloping neck never gave the impression that he was angry or arrogant. His tanned face, which looked like ripe corn, exuded an air of seriousness and wisdom, as well as gentleness and kindness. There was no anger in him. The image of Jesus in this detailed portrait by Lentulus is very different from that usually found in religious art. It gives us a rare glimpse of how a Roman official of the time might have seen Jesus, in awe of his teachings, his miraculous works, and the way he affected everyone around him. It forces us to rethink our approach to historical figures and the different ways in which we can understand them, which evolve over time. This letter not only helps us to better understand Jesus' appearance, but also shows how different people saw him, reminding us that history, faith, and art influence each other in complex ways. Jesus Christ came into the world at a time of great religious and cultural change. Since then, he has inspired and fascinated millions of people all over the world. People from other cultures have called him the prophet of truth, and his followers have called him the Son of God. His physical and spiritual presence was closely followed and revered. People said of Jesus that he was a man of average height and good looks, and that his attitude was just the right mix of respect and love. His hair, dyed hazel green, fell softly to his ears. It then fell back in darker, shinier locks that spread over her shoulders. The central part of his skull, typical of Nazarenes, was the most visible thing about him. His soft, calm eyebrows completed his appearance. His face was smooth and pale, without wrinkles or fine lines. He had a moderate colour that gave him a calm, ageless air. The colour of his beard matched that of his hair. It was neatly trimmed and bifurcated slightly at the chin. It framed a face that was both simple and mature. His clear grey eyes could express harsh rebuke or tender kindness, showing that he was both a judge and a comforter. Physically, he was tall and straight, with beautiful hands and shapely arms. When he spoke, he was known for his seriousness and modesty. This portrait is in line with earlier images of Christ and corresponds to what someone might have seen with their own eyes. He maintained a cheerful but serious demeanour and was known to cry but never laugh, showing that he could control a room. Do you like the way the perception of Jesus has evolved over time and across cultures? Please like and subscribe, and consider using the Super Thanks feature to help us continue to bring you these interesting conversations. New research, in particular on the Shroud of Turin, thus brings an additional point of view. Drawing on his knowledge as a professor of forensic medicine, Professor Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia studied the shroud and found that the man it covered was not only very handsome, but also very tall, standing at around 180 meters, with a slim, well-proportioned body. This combination of ancient texts and modern scientific research allows us to learn more about the appearance of Jesus Christ by combining historical accounts with modern forensic studies. These three-dimensional images give us a more complete picture of this mysterious figure, establishing a link between how he was portrayed in the past and how he is understood today. They continue to shape our vision of one of history's most important figures. In this way, the shroud offers us a real link with Jesus Christ, even though it has been severely damaged over the years. The anthropometric information obtained from the shroud not only helps us to understand his appearance, it also shows just how intelligent he was. His face is long and thin, with a broad, straight forehead. People have described him as gentle and kind. His cheekbones stand out, and his nose is straight, but slightly upturned. Detailed examinations of the shroud show that Christ's cranial capacity was around 1,575 cm3, making him a megalocephalus and giving him a cranial capacity coefficient of 95. This means that his brain weighed around 1,492 grams, which is much heavier than average. This suggests that he was highly intelligent. But different cultures and spiritual beliefs have led to very different ideas about Jesus' appearance throughout history. The early church fathers, such as Justin Martyr and Origen, used Isaiah 53 to say that Jesus' appearance was remarkably bland. He had no form, glory, or beauty, and looked more ordinary than other people of his time. This description is very different from other descriptions in the Bible, such as Psalm 45, which praises him as the most beautiful man. This shows how subjectively he was portrayed. These differences could mean that the way people saw Jesus and the way they reacted spiritually to him were deeply connected. According to St. Augustine, many people could imagine different ways of seeing Jesus, but in reality, he had only one real form. This view underlines an important aspect of the Christian faith. Christ's appearance is less important than the recognition that he is human. A 4th century bishop, Cyril of Jerusalem, complemented this idea by asserting that the Saviour manifests himself in different ways for each person, according to their needs. This idea supports the view that the essence of Jesus Christ goes beyond what we can see, focusing on the spiritual and life-changing effects he has on people. Combining these historical and theological perspectives, it's clear that the spiritual significance of Jesus and the personal reflections he inspires are more important to the Christian faith than his physical characteristics. The ongoing dialogue between historical fact and spiritual interpretation continues to shape our understanding of one of the most important figures in human history. This shows how he is perceived and venerated in different cultures and at different times. Because the figure of Jesus Christ is more than important in history and religion, different ways of representing him are used to meet the deep spiritual needs of believers. He presents himself as a vine for those who want to be happy, as a door for those who want to feel safe, and as a lamb for those who want to repent. This shows not only that he is divine, but also that he is a mediator, a teacher, a healer, and someone who is aware of people's weaknesses. Since the beginning of art, images of Jesus have often shown him in the guise of a young man, like the Greek god Apollo. After the official recognition of Christianity by the Roman Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, this image changed considerably. It was not until Constantine's time that a bearded figure became the most common and well-known representation of Christ in Christian art. This change in the perception of Christ is linked to interesting stories and miraculous events that are supposed to show what he really looked like. In the 7th century, the Mandylion was venerated because of the story of Christ's healing of King Abgar of Edessa through a miraculous image of his face. Similarly, Western Christianity asserts that, during his crucifixion, Christ left a mark of his face on St. Veronica's veil. This mark is called Volto Santo, or Holy Face. These images, called Acheropoieta, and not made by humans, are said to have had a major impact on the traditions surrounding the real image of Christ. During the Renaissance, European artists began to blend the ideas of icon and portrait, increasingly showing Christ as a person from their own culture and time. This style was not just an artistic choice, it was also a theological and philosophical exploration that showed what artists thought about people's suffering and God's help. It allowed them to talk about their creative power and establish a stronger link between the viewer and God, making Christ's suffering more real. When we look at how artists have depicted Jesus Christ over the years, we see a fascinating mix of cultural interpretation and personal expression. Antonello da Messina, a Sicilian painter who lived in the 1400s, drew Christ in a style similar to his other portraits, close and personal, with a plain background and the subject placed between an invented parapet. This style emphasizes the human side of Christ. This personal touch is evident in the fact that each portrait is signed, giving the impression that the artist was directly involved in its creation, as when painting one's own picture. Similarly, the famous self-portrait by German artist Albrecht Dürer, dating from the 1600s, blends his own image with sacred images of Christ. Dürer's portrait, which shows him full frontal like most icons, with long thick hair and a shoulder-length beard, is supposed to resemble traditional images of Christ. There is some confusion as to the meaning of the monogram AD, which could stand for Albrecht Dürer or Anno Domini, in the year of grace. This makes it even more difficult to distinguish between the artist and the divine subject, suggesting that the artist has a deep personal connection with the figure of Christ. In Europe, artists not only did this, they also put their own faces on images of Christ. In other parts of the world, Jesus was depicted with figures resembling Ethiopians and Indians. This shows that Christian imagery can be used worldwide and adapted to different cultures. These images demonstrate a mixed approach, blending local cultural elements with Christian stories to make religious themes easier to understand for local people. If you feel this conversation speaks to you as we examine the spiritual significance of Jesus beyond the historical images, please like and subscribe. Your participation is very important, and the super thank you button is a great way to support our work and keep these conversations going. The idea that Jesus was a light-skinned European originated in Europe and spread around the world through trade and colonization. Andrea Mantegna's Adoration of the Magi, painted in 1505, is a case in point. It shows the Magi coming from different places, such as Africa, the Near East and Asia, with gifts that show just how connected the world was at the time, such as porcelain from China and brass from the Ottoman Empire. Although Jesus is depicted in a multicultural way, his European features, such as his fair skin and blue eyes, indicate a European vision that runs counter to his Middle Eastern origins. At a time of European expansion, this image shows just how complicated the relationship between cultural domination and religious symbols was. Ultimately, Jesus' appearance may be interesting from a historical and artistic point of view, but for many Christians, the spiritual and theological core of his teachings is more important. At the heart of the faith is the belief that all followers will one day meet Jesus in a transcendent, heavenly realm, beyond the limits of time and physical appearance. This belief emphasizes the spiritual rather than literal significance of religious art, stressing that Jesus' message is for all and will be eternal. Thank you for your support.